Hello everyone, this is Mark White again with my friend and colleague Dennis Fernandez, who runs our IP strategy group. Dennis, we've had quite a few of these discussions already, and we've covered really the groundwork for how to approach innovation, the creation of innovation, and using a certain mindset for looking at competitive dynamics to develop new products into the future. And so really the idea of patent protection and thinking about how patents might be used in the future is visionary. The objective really is to use a sense of time and where industries are going to develop the right products in the right way, with the right types of building blocks, so that competitive innovators that are trying to develop solutions that are solving the same problem have to go over the same ground as yourself when you build your products. And that's sort of the basis of how you might look at creating innovation strategically when you build a business. We're beyond that now, and so the question is, how do you execute on this type of thinking? So the reality is that companies are in business. They look at markets, they have an idea of what they want to build, and they actually build it. And then they come and they talk to someone like you. And they say, Dennis, could you please file a patent for us? And that might be too late, because by the time they do that, they haven't really built their product with a sense of where the industry is going. How do you advise companies on what to do with something that is canned, they're about to launch, they want to protect their innovation? You can do that, but it's not really the maximum effort on protection for where an industry might be going in the future. So for a company that is in development now, they completed product design, they're about to launch, and you look at it and you say, you know, you guys have built for where the market is today, but not where it's going in the future. What can they do?
So with a short fuse and imminent product launch, there's a few things you can do that is legally sound. One is filing so-called provisional patent applications on your current product design or variations on it, even if you haven't prototyped these things. That has to be done correctly so it's buildable in the patent format. You need technical drawings. It needs to be enabling to someone of skill in the art. So the provisionals quickly is a good approach. Some people, if they're lucky, can go out and find issued patents that are available for sale, or maybe exclusively licensed from universities. So surprisingly, if you look these days, you'll actually find these portfolio of patents from other startups, from university research that you can acquire or exclusively license quickly. One of the things that you may want to do on a short fuse is do risk assessment on infringement to clear a path of the patent minefield so that you don't inadvertently get yourself in an infringing situation. So these are things you can do immediately if you are rushing through a product launch. And not just in the US, you can look for patents in other countries. You can analyze a freedom to operate in other international markets. The US has a cost-effective way to do the provisional filings, and you should do that if you have very limited time. Okay.
So it seems that you should think about doing two things. One is, it may be too late to change the product that you're about to launch, but you should do an assessment of what that product will attract in terms of scrutiny by other competitors, and trying to fortify your defenses by identifying sources of infringement and buying rights to that in advance. there's a separate part of this, which is, okay, so you're going out with a product which, you know, may be stepping over the rights of other competitors. Can you take your core technology then and build for the future on top? So let's say that you've got a solution, it's got a core response to a need for an enterprise or for a consumer customer. You know that you've got other competitors in a fragmented space, but products evolve, they go through generations. And so is it a good idea to say, okay, the core product probably is not as protected and as strategic as it might be, but future generations can be. So you take a product and you kind of turn it a certain way because you think that's where the industry is going, so you're building layers on top. So you can't really protect what you have today, but you're protecting and building towards the future on top of that. Does that make sense?
Sure. So once you have the basic concept locked up with your patent position, there are some strategic extensions. One approach is to look at different vertical markets where this enabling concept can be integrated in medical, automotive, entertainment. And so each of these different vertical markets where there will be layers of technology built on top of this platform could be separately patentable. The other thing I look at are the downstream activities where your technology gets bundled into other systems. So your chip in the board, in the computer, or your core software on a smartphone and other devices downstream. So sometimes the technology quickly gets disseminated downstream. And you can also patent, these aren't necessarily other vertical markets, these are just the flow of where the technology ends up, okay? And since we know what our stuff is before other people downstream even realize it exists, we can already invent into their use of it later. So design to manufacturing to testing, I mean there's some natural sequencing of things, diagnostics, the therapies, you know, stuff like that.
So to follow that that path, you really, as a business owner, an executive, have to determine where's the value for your solution downstream. Is it the introduction of products to certain verticals that will generate revenue for you, or is it in the component parts of your solution where there are manufacturers or other supply chain vendors who will take a piece of what you've done and innovate on top of that, and that's where you can create more value. So really, it's an assessment of everything you said. You're looking at verticals, you're looking at supply chain value add, and you're saying, this is where the most value is for us. That might be one piece of it. The other is, what's easiest to protect, I would think, as well. All of that.
Yeah, so this analysis can be quite complicated, Mark, because in technology, usually there are standards that define the handoff from one stage to the next to ensure compatibility with multi-sourcing, okay? So the standards play a key role in this kind of downstream transfer. And Apple's very sensitive to this, Cisco, all the Android vendors, they understand communications protocol standards, allow them to be compatible when they go downstream. And it's possible if you invent a function that is integrated in one of these standards, like MPEG, you could have an essential patent that needs to be licensed by a large portion of the community downstream. So you get a huge multiplier effect in the value of your intellectual property. It goes well beyond your product, and it touches downstream in the chain.
So I'd like to define what a standard is. Because it could be anything where there is simplicity of the solution, it's elegant, and it has energy efficiency, or it has a communication protocol that is seamless with other components of an entire solution. And so really, an innovator should define what the standard is that he or she is trying to create. And definition of standard, I would think, is based on how elegant the solution is, where everyone would want to follow that. Does that make sense, or is it something different?
Yeah, sometimes it's not a formal standard that is mandated by like an IEEE committee, like Bluetooth or Wi-Fi.
Right.
Sometimes it's a de facto standard, like people agree to start cooperating with the Apple App Store, okay, which is not a standard, but everyone's using it, or eBay.
Right.
So these are not formal industry standards, but it has the same effect. Some standards are not very technical at all, that you just need to agree on what the common interface is, like the width of the railroad tracks in the early transportation industry. They had to decide, or else you couldn't have multiple width railroad tracks, because you have to be compatible nationally.
And what's important to note here is that you don't necessarily start with a product solution with the objective of creating a standard. You can do this midstream to sort of loop around to the beginning of our discussion. If you create something and it is a nice niche response, but it's not the entire solution to where the market's going, you can rethink how your solution might be turned into a standard, or a piece of that, based on a vision of how to make the innovation better and better and better, and everyone else would want to follow that as a standard. They would adopt that in their own innovation.
Yeah, standards have curious momentum. I mean, they stick around for a long time.
Right.
Like, you know, the electrical output plugs, they're hard to change. For example, in the US, the credit card industry is mandating a shift right now to smart cards. And so they're telling all the vendors and all the financial partners that they're shifting for security reasons to a new technology. And there's a lot of pushback because it's expensive. And anyway, so you can evolve the standard midstream, but once it's locked in, it's very hard to change it, okay? I mean, it will change. I mean, you've seen it in media, from long playing records to CD music, discs to, you know, now it's all on the internet in electronic form.
So final question. Is it always the objective to create a standard? When you start out building anything, should you have in the back of your mind that you want to create a standard, that you want everybody to follow you, that you are looking for what is the best way to develop a solution to a perceived problem, and that is the standard in itself?
I would strongly recommend inventors and entrepreneurs who are investing in any patent portfolio to look for a hook that might latch onto an emerging platform. And if that becomes officially standardized, it could be a very valuable patent position.
So, going back to some of our earliest discussions, when you're looking at the evolution of a market, 3 to 5 years, even 10 years. 10 years is a long time. You are trying to create a standard, because that standard is where everyone has to go. So a standard is definitional, and by definition, a standard is a convergence point of where technology has to go to break through to a solution that is usable by your customer, whoever that may be. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why don't we leave the discussion here on this point? Dennis, we've got a lot to talk about, but I think standards is one of the keys to innovation and success in the marketplace. Thank you all.